Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. That was a little weird. Hello. It's the sweater, okay? This sweater is amazing. Hi, my name is Alana. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I review books. I also like a good sweater. I can't say no to stripes and I can't say no to sweaters. But when I saw this has nothing to do with this review. You clicked on this video because you wanted to watch me talk about the second Outlander book, Dragonfly and Amber. But before we do that, we're going to talk about this sweater. This sweater is so thick and cozy and loose and oversized with the collar and the V-neck, but not showing too much, because I can't be having all that out here in these streets. That's not for everybody and their mama. But it's got the black stripe instead of the traditional navy blue. Ugh, man, and the sleeves go all the way. I have my arms down. And I have long arms. They go all the way down past my fingertips. And for a purse, I just love that coziness. Ugh, I have very long limbs. I'm not a short person, but I'm not a tall person. I'm actually at the tail end of average height for a woman. But, if I put on heels though, I can easily be 5'10" plus. But I have long limbs. And when I get a sweater that has long sleeves, I'm ecstatic. Anyway, I talked about nothing for a minute and 30 seconds. Okay, hi, my name is Alana. I think I already said that. I review books on this channel. I'm a big fan of throwback YouTube videos in which we just sit down in long format and talk about one book and we break it down. So that's what I like to do. Dragonfly and Amber by Gabaldon. Last year, and I'm going to hopefully remember to link this below this video, my review of Outlander, which is one of my longest reviews on this channel, because that book is a gold mine for analysis, and so is this one. Dragonfly and Amber is his second Outlander book. So if you haven't read the Outlander series, I don't really think I have too many spoilers in here, if any. I really try to just focus on themes that I've noticed versus plot details. But there's some stuff here. But if you haven't read the Outlander books or even watched the show, if you watch the show, now you'll know exactly what's going on. The show matches the plot of the books pretty closely. But if you haven't read the books yet, I'm not giving away too much. This won't be as long as my Outlander review, but there's a lot of interesting stuff to discuss here. I'm 3 minutes in. Let's go ahead on and talk about it. Okay. And those who must see in order to believe, the effects of belief wrought by seeing trembled fearful at his side, terrified at what else must now be believed. I'm not going to refer to who that he is because that he is a spoiler. So anyway, Dragonfly and Amber by Gabaldon, as I've said, is the sequel to Outlander. And the main protagonists, Jamie and Claire, find themselves in France in the mid-18th century. The Battle of Culloden is looming over the horizon. And the Battle of Culloden was a battle that happened between the Scottish clansmen and those who felt like Charles Stuart was the rightful king of Scotland in the British army/monarchy. And that battle had a devastating impact on the clans. They banned the wearing of tartan. They banned the wearing of a broadsword. I believe they also banned speaking Gaelic. So it was just a cultural death in a lot of ways. It decimated those clans, and it's if you were to go to where the battle took place, so many clansmen died that they just have rocks that say Clan Mackenzie, Clan Fraser, etc., so that you just know which clans were represented. Very sad. Side note, and this is something that when I first read Outlander and I started learning about the Battle of Culloden, I think it would be really interesting if a historian, I'm not saying that I couldn't do this myself, but were to take the Battle of Culloden and parallel it with the Battle of Wounded Knee that happened in the United States between the Lakota and the U.S. military. The Battle of Wounded Knee was a battle with the Lakota, might have been some other Native American tribes in there, that just completely decimated. And after that, you really see a shift in how, just because the tribes were so weakened after that, it was just, there's a lot of parallels actually between the Battle of Wounded Knee and the Battle of Culloden and what happened afterwards. Very fascinating. That's a parallel that I really want to talk about, but I ain't got time for that. Okay. But that's just something that I've been playing around in my head since 2015. So if you know about the Battle of Wounded Knee and you know about the Battle of Culloden, research both of them side by side and you're like, interesting. Okay. So anyway, the Battle of Culloden is looming over the horizon, and the pair are going, so Jamie and Claire, the pair, are doing whatever they can in their power to try to prevent Charles Stuart from pulling together an army to reclaim his throne. The reason why they're doing that is because Claire is from the future, and Claire knows just how devastating this is going to be for these clans, and they're trying to save as many lives as they can. And to save it, and to maybe prolong a way of life maybe a little bit longer. So they do start in France. And so while in France, though, while they're scheming, Claire and Jamie still have to deal with the drama of court intrigue. So they're ingratiated now into the upper echelons of French society. They meet the King of France. They meet some other nobility. They're dealing with gossip, sketchy characters, and there are some tensions that arise in their marriage. They also have to determine if it's futile to attempt to change history, because Claire is also still figuring out what are the rules of time travel and if historical events are inevitable. If you've watched my War and Peace review, which I posted the week before this, there are a lot of similarities between the themes of War and Peace and Outlander. Who would have thought, right? I would argue, just like this main theme of War and Peace, the main theme in Dragonfly and Amber is this exploration of the inevitability of history and can the past be changed. Again, we're dealing with historical events. And we have a time traveling narrative in which our main character, Claire, is a time traveler. So she's coming from the 20th century with this knowledge. And so she shared that with Jamie, who's her husband. And they're trying to prevent something that's disastrous to the Scottish clans. Claire has the benefit of knowing the future, but she really starts to understand how limited her knowledge is and how imperfect it is, because all she has are historical accounts. Jamie and Claire really don't know if their efforts are going to make a difference. Who are we to alter the course of history, to change the course of events, not for ourselves, but for princes and peasants, for the entire country of Scotland? Seeking refuge from a world in which huge and mysterious forces are let loose to destruction. I'm telling you, does that not remind you of War and Peace? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Are you smelling what I'm stepping in? Okay. Another very War and Peace-esque element to Dragonfly and Amber is this idea that the individual impacts historical events, and how any one person playing a role in this force, and how any one person is playing a role in this force that's called history. So there is this dichotomy again between the individual and personal autonomy in the collective. So there's this dichotomy between the personal autonomy and the collective, and how the individual still has moral and ethical judgments to make, because regardless of what history is history, regardless of what events is going to event, as a person, there are still moral and ethical judgments that you should make, just because right is right and wrong is wrong, right? Or what you perceive to be right is right, and what you perceive to be wrong is wrong. But again, what you may be doing, how is that really impacting the fabric of history? A lot of interesting questions. to think about that I don't even know if have proper answers. Each one of us can be responsible only for his own actions and his own conscience. What I do cannot be laid to your account, no matter the effects. So this is Jamie speaking, and I said cannot instead of how Diana Gabaldon has it spelled out here in Scottish Highland dialect, because I think, side note, my favorite dialect in the English-speaking world is Scottish Highland dialects. It is so fun, full of so much character, and I love listening to it. Thanks to Outlander, I can actually understand a lot of it. And I read a book called Marriage by Susan Ferrier, who was a contemporary of Jane Austen, and a lot of that book is written in Scottish Highland dialect. Immaculate. It was, yeah, so anyway, that was a side note, but I can't do a Scottish accent if I tried, or Scottish Highland dialect if I tried. I would butcher it. I love that Diana Gabaldon asked these questions in this book. It makes these stories more interesting and dimensional. I think that Outlander gets this reputation for being smutty romance, and it's really not. I mean, yeah, you got some spicy scenes in here. Not as spicy as in some books, okay? I actually think it's pretty palatable in this book, or in these books. But it's just so much more than that. She's really asking really interesting questions. And I think because it was marketed as a romance for so long, now it's marketed as general fiction / sci-fi historical fiction, that it doesn't always get the credit it deserves. But that's a sidebar. We have these extremely flawed characters, and I just love that Diana Gabaldon is using these characters to ask these questions about morality and ethics. And should you be allowed to do things that are sketchy for the greater good? Like, where is that line? And then within this framework, again, of fate, inevitability, and history, you still have Claire trying to figure out how time travel works. What are the rules? Can a time traveler have an impact on history, or are they really just a being that's able to time travel, but they just get swept up in this force called history, and they just become another player? They're just another pawn in these historical events, because these events are still destined to happen as they're going to happen. Again, my War and Peace lovers, you might want to holler at this book. You don't even have to read the whole 2 series. I think if you just hollered at the first book and the second book, you could compare and contrast. I'm just going to leave that right there, okay? That's a free nugget for the day. While I thought I knew what was to come, I had no certainty at all about it. I had been married to a historian, she's referring to Frank, the man that she was married to in the 20th century, and knew just how unreliable historical sources often were. For that matter, I had no surety that my own presence could or couldn't change anything. Claire is finally really understanding in Dragonfly and Amber that knowing the past does not make the time traveler all-knowing. And in this case, hindsight is not 20/20. History as a study is still missing elements of events that create ambiguity, and couple that with the romanticization of historical figures and events, this is still leading to misinterpretations and gaps in one's understanding of what actually happened. No one actually knows what happens in history in these past events unless they were actually there. And even sometimes when we have people who lived in certain areas, you still have multiple opinions. You still have people who lived during that era or during those time periods. You still have multiple viewpoints, because it's still no two people may have necessarily experienced that event the same way. And what about these people? We think of historical persons as something different than ourselves, sometimes halfway mythological. Do they, now this they is referring to historians and artists, see the bones in the dust of the earth, see the essence of a thing that was, and clothe it in new flesh? So the plotting beast emerges as a fabulous monster. Again, this also is something that Hilary Mantel plays around with in the Wolf Hall trilogy, how these historical figures, Thomas Cromwell, Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII, are shrouded in mythology in a lot of ways. So, I mean, Actually, consider this the trifecta of three series, well, two series and a book that have a lot in common: War and Peace, Wolf Hall Trilogy, and Outlander. Very different books in a lot of ways, but the themes just weave them all together. Diana Gabaldon does introduce a few key players slash characters in this narrative in Dragonfly and Amber that are pivotal to the remainder of the series. I'm not even going to state their names because they're major spoilers. Because not just their names are major, like the backgrounds of these characters, it's a lot, and I'll be giving way too much. This book opens in a very startling way. And I remember when I first read this book, the first time I read this book was the end of, maybe say around November 2015. I picked it up right after I read the first book. I was startled because I thought I had skipped a book in the series. I had to, like Dragonfly and Amber is the second book. It's because it starts in a way that Diana Gabaldon just scares the pants off you. You're like, whoa, 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 whoa. How did we get here? What did you just do? And then she takes that starting point and backtracks to get you back to the beginning of where this book starts, and it's alarming. And I was like, my girl, you have to do me like that. You gave me a heart attack. Had to go pop some Pepto-Bismol. I was getting heartburn. So yeah, don't be startled. You're going to be a little startled by the beginning of this book, not going to lie. She doesn't play fair with the timeline there. That being said, one of the characters is confronted with Claire's story about her being a time traveler and Jamie and all this other stuff. And this character chooses to believe her. Gabaldon shows how the truth is often more ridiculous than the lie, and yet it takes a special personality to be willing to set one's preconceived notions aside and entertain the seemingly impossible. Could it be possible that he really did have enough imagination to be able to grasp the truth? He didn't yet believe, but he had the imagination to doubt. That I'm just going to leave there, because if I go into any more depth, I'm going to start spoiling things. I'm going to start wrapping this up with just some comments about Jamie and Claire as characters, more as character studies. In the first Outlander, in my review of Outlander that I did last year, I kind of did this as well. What is happening? I spent quite a bit of time talking about Claire as a character. Okay. And I have to say, Jamie in this book is incredibly nuanced and complex. And dare I say, he is the most dimensional character in the series up to this point. Even though Claire is the main character, and the majority of the book is in Claire's first person narrative. We're in her head. Jamie is the character that takes the cake. He is the lead male protagonist. And he isn't always likable. Jamie is highly flawed in both Outlander and in Dragonfly and Amber. One of my friends, Anna, is currently reading the first book. She's familiar with the show, and she's messaging me and just, wow, there's just so much nuance and so many differences within these characters. TV Jamie and Claire are not book Jamie and Claire. They are very different characters, and I dare I say, as excellent as the acting is in that show, book Jamie and Claire, you could analyze them for decades. They just do these things. You want to get in their head and analyze the psychology of them. They're very fascinating. Jamie in this book is even funnier than he was in Outlander. Jamie is a card. He's laugh out loud funny. I don't know how many times, some of my annotations here are just something that Jamie said and like, LOL. So there's this scene where Jamie is discussing with Claire how constipated the King of France is because he eats too many rich foods. He was like, what he needs is some porridge. Okay. But he says in his very Scottish Jamie way, he's like, I'm paraphrasing it to 21st century Alana, who lives on the East Coast of the United States. My boy needs some oatmeal. He needs some fiber. And I just thought it was funny. Like the way that Jamie says it is funny. And he also, Diana Gabaldon puts Jamie into certain scenarios that she didn't have to put him in, but she puts them in to show just how complex and complicated Jamie is. He has a lot of grace personality wise. It would be easy, have been easier for Diana Gabaldon to make Jamie this leading male character that's just chivalrous and handsome. That's easy to do. But he's not always likable. But she made him more flawed. She made him more funny, more dynamic, and more forgiving than he needs to be. There were a few times when Jamie does something and I was like, well, that's actually really deep that Diana Gabaldon did that. He has an interaction with Blackjack Randall. If you read the first book, you know Blackjack Randall is the worst. Where Jamie shows Blackjack unnecessary kindness and I didn't notice it the first time I read this book. I was like, that Gabaldon didn't have to do that. But she put Jamie in a position to suck up his own ego and be a human being to Blackjack Randall. There's also another scene where Jamie loves horses. He's excellent with horses and horses like him. He just has that, some animals just get on with certain types of people. Jamie is a horse guy. And his favorite horse, the one that he's riding the whole book, and I think that he has in the first book, there's a point in the narrative where he thought his horse died. And then Jamie cries when he finds out his horse was not killed. Again, unnecessary, but she did it anyway to add a layer of complexity to this character that she didn't have to do. Dare I say it, Jamie Fraser might be one of the most complicated and fascinating male characters that I've come across. I'm actually going to say I think he's neck and neck with me with the Count of Monte Cristo. The Count in Monte Cristo is he's such a strange person. He's likable. He's not always likable. He does these things. You're like, why would you do that? But then he's also quite a vulnerable person. Jamie and the Count, to me, might be some of the most complicated psychological characters that I've come across. Male characters, rather, that I've come across thus far. Because they do these things and you can't always reconcile them. I'm going to stop talking about Jamie. I'm going to talk about Claire for a hot second, and then I'm going to wrap this up. Claire is... I go into a lot more detail about Claire in my first review. I'm not going to rehash that, how Claire is one of the most unreliable female narrators I have come across in literature. She's also very fascinating, but I hashed all that out in my first review. I will make sure to link it down below because I spent quite a bit of time discussing that. Again, Claire is highly unreliable, and I will say when you're reading these books and Claire isn't the one narrating, you have to, certain things that she's saying, but she's saying the exact opposite of what she means. Claire is fascinating. I will say this, and I noticed this in the first book, and I still haven't figured out by this book because it repeats. Claire is consistently compared to, in this series, to wolves. She is constantly put into situations where wolves are present, or somehow wolves are mentioned, or she's directly compared to a wolf herself. I can't put my finger on it. Now, Blackjack Randall's middle name is Wolverstein, so there's maybe something there. But when Blackjack Randall eventually does exit the narrative, by the end of this book, we don't really get much more Blackjack Randall. His story is kind of done. His character, his body, we're moving on with the story. There's still these mentions of the wolf. Claire glanced at him impatiently. The sun was setting behind her, and it made her eyes grow amber like a wolf's. And that's just one out of many instances in this book that I noted where Claire is in the presence of a wolf or the skeleton of a wolf, or somehow there's a metaphor there with a wolf. I can't put my finger on it. I'm going to have to, I can't figure it out. if you have read the series, and as I continue to read the series, I'm going to have to pay attention to that. Do you have any thoughts on that comparison and why Gabaldon is doing that? Let's wrap up. This is my second read of Dragonfly and Amber, as I've said, and I appreciated this way more than I did in 2015 when I first read it. I liked it in 2015, but at that moment, I was heading into a reading slump, and if you were to ask me to rate it then, I would have given it a 4. Gabaldon is such a fantastic storyteller. Yes, these books are pure fun and pure entertainment, and that is a way that you can read them. These can be escape books if you want them to be. There's just action and romance and intrigue and backstabbing. It's a romp. It's fun. But it is also way more literary and complex with the themes than, again, like I said earlier, that often may get credit for. There are things in this series that could be analyzed for days. And keep that in mind, I've only read the first 3 books. And I know of people who read the whole series, and some people say as you get into the further and further, they become even more character driven and more literary. Actually, one of the books, I think it's book 7 or 8, Written in My Heart's Own Blood, I think is the title, was named one of the top sci-fi books at the time when it was released. So, it's sci-fi because we're dealing with time travel. But Gabaldon, in my opinion, is a genius. She did scientific writing before she ventured into fiction, and I just think that the woman is smart. I would love to talk to her. This was a book, again, that once I picked it up, I had a hard time putting it down. I read this at the end. I picked it up the last week of 2022 and finished it to about 2 weeks into 2023. And it just got better on the second read. And I look forward to reading it again sometime. But I'm going to continue to move on with the rest of the series. I have read the third one, like I said, and after that, I have no idea what happens. I have refused to watch the show past the 3rd season. And so I will be experiencing the rest of the series for the first time once I get to past the 3rd book. I hope the 3rd book is right here. I have it sitting out here. There's actually a method to the madness of all these books that are out. All of these books have space on a shelf somewhere, but they're out here because I'm percolating. This stuff back here, I'm percolating when I may want to read them potentially this year. If I can squeeze this in somehow, maybe by the end of 2023, I'm going to try. Because it took a lot of willpower for me to just not jump right into the 3rd book. But I got so much other stuff to read. So yeah. Are you intrigued by the Outlander series? Have you read them? What do you think about them? I need feedback on the Claire and Wolf situation. I can't link it up. I need answers to my questions. I gave this book a 5 out of 5. I thoroughly enjoyed it because it's fun and it's smart and it's compulsively readable. Look at this long sleeves. I love it. So yes. Are you an Outlander fan? Are you curious to jump into Outlander? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, leave me a comment. If you would like to, feel free to follow me on Instagram, where I get up to more book of shenanigans. All of my reviews go live on Instagram first. And I also post reading wrap-ups in my stories at the end of each month. And I also do a dedicated post on my Instagram feed for what my monthly reading list is going to be. And also I like to post goofy reels and funny memes because, in my opinion, the internet is for having a good time. We're too serious sometimes. So I like to use my Instagram as a way to laugh. There you go. Feel free to follow me there. I will see you in the next one.